The balance of power in the Iranian plateau underwent a sudden shift with the rise of the Parthians under Arsaces I. Around 280 BC, the Parni breached the Seleucid frontier, prompting a retaliatory campaign led by Demonimus. The primary objective of the campaign was to punish the Parni and reaffirm Seleucid authority in the region to deter further aggression. The failure to effectively curb Parni aggression in the early 240s contributed to the uprisings of Andragoras and Diodotus, ultimately leading to Arsaces' invasion of Parthia. In the 230s, despite their recent achievements, the Parthians, led by Arsaces I, anticipated an imminent Seleucid retaliation. The weakening of the eastern frontier necessitated a Seleucid campaign to regain control of the region and to discipline the Parthians and Bactrians. By the 230s, Seleucus II could no longer overlook the escalating crisis in the east. Consequently, he initiated the first royal campaign into the east since his great-grandfather, albeit with significantly different outcomes. The central geographical position of Parthia provided the Parthians with various opportunities for expansion across the Iranian plateau, but it also posed the threat of potential conflicts on multiple fronts. Engaging in a two-front war against the Seleucids in the west and the Bactrians in the east could have been catastrophic for Arsaces I's fledgling kingdom. This context helps to elucidate Arsaces' apprehension about external threats in the early 230s and his proactive military campaigns in Hyrcania, including rapid military mobilization. The concerns of Parthia and Bactria about potential aggression from the Seleucid Empire became a reality when Seleucus II and Antiochus Hyrcania agreed to a tense truce around 236 BC. As conflict temporarily subsided in the western region, Seleucus began preparing for an invasion of the east. Though details about Seleucus' military campaign are scarce, it is likely that the invasion took place during the truce between Seleucus and Antiochus, roughly between 236 and 229 BC. The initial phases of the Eastern campaign proved successful for Seleucus II as he managed to pacify Babylonia, strengthen Media, and reclaim much of Parthia. This compelled Arsaces I to temporarily withdraw towards the Central Asian steppe, as recorded by Strabo. Later Arsaces, when he fled from Seleucus Callinicus, withdrew into the country of the Apasiaci. Despite claims by some historians, there is no concrete evidence of a clear military victory by Seleucus over the Parthians. On the contrary, Roman tradition states that Arsaces later defeated Seleucus. Considering these accounts, Strabo's brief narrative prompts further investigation. Viewing Seleucus's anabasis in the broader context of the Parthians' defensive wars against Macedonian and Roman invaders over the following centuries, it becomes apparent that Arsaces' withdrawal in the face of Seleucus's advance may have been a deliberate Parthian strategy rather than a sign of weakness. Strabo's account inadvertently seems to document the earliest reference to a distinct warfare method employed by the Parthians, known as the feign retreat, defeat in detail mode of warfare, which provided them with a crucial advantage in their ongoing efforts to dominate the Hellenistic Middle East. Regrettably, only a brief outline of the campaign has survived. However, two events are certain. Following the initial Parthian withdrawal, they decisively defeated the Seleucids in battle. According to Justin's records, in a confrontation with King Seleucus, who sought retribution against the rebels, the Parthians emerged victorious. They commemorate the day of this triumph with great solemnity, as it marks the beginning of their liberty. This defeat, along with the possible capture of Seleucus II, seems to have paved the way for the formal recognition of independence for Parthia and Bactria. After the unexpected passing of Seleucus Callinicus and the assassination of Seleucus Sirynx, Prince Antiochus III assumed the Seleucid throne in 223 BC. Despite inheriting a disorganized state, Antiochus III swiftly brought stability to the realm. While he dedicated much of the 210s to waging territorial wars in the west, he never seemed to lose sight of avenging his father's unsuccessful eastern campaign. He engaged in a stalemate with Ptolemy IV during the Fourth Syrian War and managed to regain significant territories in Anatolia. This allowed Antiochus to fortify his western domains with robust frontiers, enabling him to lead a formidable force of approximately 70,000 soldiers to reconquer the east. Antiochus III's motivations for his eastern campaign included personal reasons, such as seeking retribution for his father, pursuing glory, and enhancing his prestige. Additionally, there were compelling geopolitical factors propelling his grand eastern endeavor. As noted by Polybius, an anabasis was essential to restore Seleucid dominance in the Hellenistic Middle East through the use of force and intimidation. After a year of organizing his soldiers and supplies in Babylonia, Antiochus III began his grand eastern expedition by entering Media in 210. His first objective was to secure the money he needed to fund his anabasis. Therefore, he looted about 4,000 talents of gold and silver from the Temple of Ane in Ecbatana. With this money, Antiochus could direct his full attention against his first military objective, the reconquest of Parthia and Hyrcania. At the time of Antiochus III's invasion, Parthia was vulnerable. The Parthians no longer could rely on the military aid of Bactria, and Arsaces I had died of old age in 211, making his son, Arsaces II, otherwise possibly known as Artabanus I, the new king of Parthia, only 1 year before Antiochus' anabasis began. Arsaces II initially misjudged his enemy's objectives and determination at the start of the campaign. Similar to previous instances, the Parthians appeared to withdraw or flee when facing a superior approaching army. It is likely that Arsaces sought to emulate his father by employing the Parthians' deceptive withdrawal strategy in response to Antiochus' substantial invasion. Recognizing that his army was no match for Antiochus' overwhelming force in a conventional battle, Arsaces quickly realized that Antiochus had outmaneuvered him and had gained the upper hand in the campaign. As a result, Arsaces regrouped his main force and left some detachments to hinder the Seleucids by destroying the wells. A key objective of the Parthian warfare approach was to goad an enemy into breaking formation and pursuing recklessly, allowing the Parthians to launch a counterattack and dismantle isolated segments of a much larger force. Antiochus III unwittingly played into the strengths of the Parthians' warfare approach when he dispatched Nicomedes with 1,000 horsemen to assault the Parthian detachments near the wells. This provided the Parthians with a significant opportunity to isolate and eliminate a crucial part of Antiochus' army early in the campaign. Polybius documented that the Parthian detachments were routed by their opponents, compelling them to flee. However, this tactical maneuver was a deliberate strategy in Parthian warfare that was misunderstood or disregarded by Polybius and his contemporaries. It is plausible that the Parthians feigned retreat to lure Nicomedes and his vulnerable detachment into pursuit. Lacking the strength to overpower the Seleucid cavalry, the Parthians sought to entice Nicomedes to lead his forces towards the main Parthian army. Despite their efforts, Nicomedes remained disciplined and returned to the main Seleucid force after securing the wells, not taking the bait. Additionally, the actions of Arsaces II played a crucial role in the initial setback for the Parthians. After securing the wells, the Seleucids could advance northeast to engage the Parthians collectively. Arsaces II realized that he could no longer overpower separate segments of Antiochus' army as they traversed Parthia. Therefore, he abandoned the isolated capital, Hecatopolis, and retreated into the mountains of Hyrcania. After traversing around 350 miles of barren land, which took over a month, Antiochus and his massive army finally reached Hecatopolis. Upon observing its fortifications, Antiochus anticipated that the Parthians would engage in battle in their usual way, defending their strategically located capital. he assumed they would fight on familiar terms, failing to grasp the true intent behind the Parthians' retreat. Accessing Hyrcania from Hecatopolis is challenging due to the presence of the Alborz Mountains. Taylor suggests that Antiochus III opted to invade Hyrcania to replenish his army, as it was too exposed in the arid lands to the south of the Alborz. Although the more fertile lands of Hyrcania would have eased the army's foraging efforts, crossing the formidable and perilous Alborz presented a daunting task. The region posed numerous logistical challenges for Antiochus and his sizable army. Ultimately, Antiochus invaded Hyrcania in pursuit of the Parthians. The Parthians were aware that the Seleucid army could not traverse this rugged terrain in large numbers, which helps to explain Arsaces II's decision to retreat to this region, as he sought to regain the upper hand in the campaign. The challenging terrain prompted Antiochus to divide his substantial army into multiple units. This created an opening for the Parthians to launch a counterattack and level the playing field. Recognizing an opportunity to rectify previous errors, Arsaces II swiftly implemented the Parthians' harass strategy. Antiochus, however, had made thorough preparations to minimize the vulnerability of his army as they advanced towards Hyrcania. He had brought a significant contingent of army servants, comprising engineers and workers, to clear the mountain passes across the Alborz. This ensured that his exposed phalanx and baggage train could remain in close proximity to the advanced light divisions, preventing the army from being overstretched. Despite Arsaces positioning his men strategically to ambush the Seleucids, Antiochus's readiness and Arsaces' ongoing judgments prevented the Parthians from exploiting this crucial opportunity. In addition to the army servants tasked with clearing the mountain passes for his phalanx and baggage train, Antiochus decided to shield his main force with swiftly moving, lightly armed troops. The agility and adaptability of these light troops on rugged terrain made them an effective screen for protecting Antiochus's divided main force. Even if the Parthians managed to isolate and attack one of these divisions, the Seleucids could swiftly dispatch reinforcements while keeping their slower, heavily armed infantry secure. Furthermore, the javelin throwers, slingers, and archers within these light divisions could match the firepower of the Parthians. In the narrow mountain passes of the Alborz, the Parthians, faced with Antiochus's swift light divisions, were unable to leverage their superior speed or mobility to overwhelm the Seleucids. Arsaces II was caught off guard by Antiochus III's strategic advance into the Alborz, which turned out to be a considerable blunder. The Parthians had prepared extensive defenses to ensnare and obliterate Antiochus and his army, limiting their own speed and maneuverability in the process, as they knew the terrain favored them in conventional warfare against the Seleucids. Had Antiochus been less prepared, he would have faced daunting obstacles, rough terrain, barricades, and well-positioned Parthian soldiers. Arsaces had intended his retreat towards Hyrcania to lure an overconfident enemy into a mountain pass ambush, potentially annihilating the Seleucid army by isolating and destroying it with concentrated fire. However, Arsaces mistakenly assumed that Antiochus would act recklessly, and the Parthians were evidently unprepared for assaults by concentrated light-armed troops. Once again, Antiochus had outmaneuvered Arsaces, and the Parthian leader's miscalculations cost him the chance to defeat the Seleucid invasion. Subsequently, the Parthians swiftly lost the initiative as the light-armed divisions began to dismantle their ambush positions. Antiochus III's careful planning and strategic foresight neutralized the Parthians' threat of ambush. The swift and agile divisions quickly dispersed the isolated Parthian detachments, rendering their lack of speed and firepower ineffective. This allowed the Seleucid army to progress steadily and securely after the army servants removed the obstacles in the pass. The dismounted Parthian cavalry found themselves at a disadvantage in the mountain pass against the Seleucid light divisions, unable to disrupt the main Seleucid force. Arsaces II, realizing his error, commanded his forces to retreat and regroup. Despite the failed ambush, Arsaces II recognized that his best opportunity to defeat Antiochus III lay in engaging the isolated Seleucid army among the mountains. However, he also observed the limitations of his soldiers in the mountain skirmishes. Acknowledging the strength of the Parthian army in speed and mobility, Arsaces II decided to concentrate his forces on the more open summit of the pass, where his cavalry would have greater maneuverability and effectiveness. Antiochus successfully navigated the treacherous terrain, albeit slowly and with great difficulty, finally reaching the pass of Mount Labus after 8 days. Arsaces II used this time to regroup his forces and devise a new plan, taking advantage of Antiochus's slow progress through the mountain pass. The Parthians had gathered near the mountain pass, confident in their ability to block the enemy's advance, leading to a fierce confrontation. Polybius' account suggests that the Parthians, in a desperate move, employed their overwhelmed strategy as Antiochus's army drew near, executing a massed assault attack against the Seleucid phalanx until they eventually outmaneuvered them, forcing a retreat. However, it seems highly improbable that the Parthians believed they could decisively defeat Antiochus' large army in a conventional battle and drive them back. Being vastly outnumbered, they lacked the ability to outflank the advancing Seleucid army. Instead, it appears Arsaces intended to deceive the Seleucids, creating the illusion of offering a conventional battle while maintaining the Parthians' harass strategy. By staging what seemed like a major engagement, they sought to pressure Antiochus into deploying his valuable phalanx on unfavorable, rocky terrain, which ultimately occurred. If they could disrupt the phalanx and break its ranks, it might still inflict significant damage on a crucial segment of the Seleucid army, prompting Antiochus to reconsider his campaign. Polybius recounts that the Parthians initially engaged the Seleucid phalanx with great determination, fighting in a dense mass and face-to-face for an entire day. While the Parthians' brave and spirited attacks were commendable, it seems implausible that their cavalry could have sustained a prolonged melee against pike infantry. Direct assaults on dense pike formations would have likely resulted in significant losses for Arsaces II's army, particularly among his lightly armed and unarmored horse archers. Moreover, it's unrealistic to expect horses to willingly impale themselves. Therefore, Polybius' portrayal of massed cavalry assaults by the Parthians at the Battle of Mount Labus is questionable. Instead, the Parthians' determined attacks likely reflect their strategic use of aggressive hit-and-run tactics. The Parthian horse archers continuously harassed the Seleucid army throughout the day, aiming to disrupt the phalanx formation. The length and determination of the Parthian attacks during this engagement serve as evidence that the Parthians had already developed a method of supplying their horse archers on the battlefield before the Battle of Carrhae. Whenever a gap appeared in the phalanx, the Parthian cataphracts could launch a coordinated assault to exploit it. If the Seleucids attempted to break out of the phalanx, the Parthians were prepared to counterattack. This tactical approach was crucial for the Parthians to effectively challenge the Seleucid army. However, the challenging mountainous terrain worked in favor of the Seleucids, as it limited the Parthians' ability to maneuver freely or flank their densely formed ranks. As a result, the Seleucids were able to maintain their formation and utilize the terrain for protection against the Parthians' limited maneuverability. While the battle halted the Seleucid advance, it did not provide the Parthians with a significant opportunity to defeat Antiochus III's army. The Parthian cavalry found it difficult to penetrate the phalanx, while the phalanx couldn't advance without exposing itself, resulting in a stalemate. Antiochus III recognized the potential threat to his phalanx and instructed his light-armed troops to outflank the Parthians on the rugged terrain. According to Polybius, the Parthians then panicked and fled. However, it seems more likely that Arsaces II, realizing the limited effectiveness of assaulting the Seleucid phalanx and seeing that Antiochus had outflanked him, decided to test the Seleucids' discipline once more by employing the Parthians' feigned retreat tactic. Instead of simply fleeing, the Parthians pretended to retreat to goad the Seleucids into a reckless pursuit. In the more open terrain at the mountain pass summit, Arsaces hoped to lure the Seleucids into breaking formation and then overwhelm them with counterattacks. This tactic almost succeeded when some of Antiochus' men impulsively pursued the Parthians, but Antiochus sensed the trap, halted the pursuit, reorganized his forces, and thwarted the Parthians' attempt to counterattack. In the face of numerous missed opportunities, Arsaces II found himself with dwindling options. His repeated withdrawals without a decisive military victory had led to the abandonment of much of his kingdom, with little to show for it. It became evident that he could not continue yielding ground to Antiochus III's relentless advance without effectively relinquishing his entire kingdom. Stranded without allies in the Central Asian steppe and in Bactria to support his remaining forces, Arsaces made a radical shift in strategy and decided to focus on a siege defense to protect what was left of his realm. While Antiochus had taken control of the royal residence at Tambrax, Arsaces still retained possession of the strongest citadel in the region, Sirynx. Thus, he resolved to compel Antiochus into a siege in order to impede his progress. Sirynx, with its triple moats, 6 wooden walls, and formidable central fortification, presented an intimidating defensive structure. Arsaces had stationed a portion of his remaining force at Sirynx with the hope of impeding the Seleucid army and compelling Antiochus to negotiate. This strategy would later prove effective for the Bactrians in defending their fortress capital, Bactra Zariaspa. However, in the initial years of Antiochus Anabasis, the Seleucid army was well provisioned and had sustained minimal losses. Furthermore, Antiochus was resolute in this early phase of his eastern campaign. His aim was to restore Seleucid dominance over the entire Iranian plateau, necessitating the complete submission of the Parthians. Perhaps to secure the fortress before winter set in and made the sieges more arduous, Antiochus III employed frontal assaults and tunneling efforts to capture Sirynx. The conflict was fierce, resulting in significant casualties as the Parthians fiercely defended the walls and countered the tunnels. Nevertheless, Antiochus mobilized the full might of his army and its engineers to overcome Sirynx and its defenders.
Right, lads! If you get lost, take... Remember who you are! Now fight!
The siege operations at Sirynx were extensive, likely lasting several weeks, as the Parthians battled the Seleucids to exhaustion. The inner wall eventually began to give way, prompting a desperate breakout attempt by the remaining defenders. However, they lacked the necessary strength to succeed, and the breakout failed. After a final assault, the city fell to Antiochus, with the remaining Parthian defenders surrendering. There is no confirmation from Polybius regarding the presence of Arsaces II at Sirynx, and it seems unlikely that he was there. Had Arsaces been among the prisoners of war, it is improbable that Polybius and Justin would have overlooked such a significant event. Furthermore, Antiochus's subsequent actions suggest that Arsaces remained active in the field. Following his losses in the Alborz Mountains and at the costly Siege of Sirynx, Arsaces II had depleted much of the Parthians' military power. Antiochus led his army from Sirynx into the Astuoun Valley, situated between the Kopet Dag and Binalud mountain ranges, indicating that Arsaces had deployed his remaining forces to protect the critical Parthian city of Nisa in southern Turkmenistan. Rather than risking another prolonged siege or further punishing Arsaces by removing him from power, Antiochus chose to diplomatically bind Arsaces to his will. The peace agreement and alliance with Arsaces served as an acknowledgement of Antiochus's achievements in Parthia and Hyrcania, enabling him to solidify his gains before advancing east toward Bactria. 2 decades later, the Seleucids suffered defeat at the hands of the Roman Republic in the Battle of Magnesia, initiating a century-long decline that allowed the Parthians to regain their independence and emerge as a dominant power in the Middle East.